On this episode of Hoosier Adventures, we check out one of America's most macabre tourist sites and see where JFK was assassinated. We'll start off with a view of the 6th floor museum from the side that's not quite as famous. This is the back. You can see that awesome freight elevator here. Of course, the 6th floor museum is most famous as the building where Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly shot President Kennedy in 1963. We'll get to that allegedly part later if you stay tuned. Most people don't realize that all 4 dart lines actually pass behind the 6th floor museum, so it's real easy to take dart. Here's a railroad signal tower that I just thought was cool and wanted to get some footage of. And if you wait until the end of the video, you'll actually see a dart train go by on these tracks. Originally, the 6th floor museum was the Dallas School Book Depository. Today, the building's basically dedicated to all things President Kennedy. We're not able to go inside today because this is the middle of the quarantine. I actually haven't been inside this museum in probably 15 or 20 years since I was a little kid and visited Dallas. But I figured we could take a little stroll around the area surrounding the 6th floor museum and see some key sites of the Kennedy assassination. And it was just kind of cool to get to see a place where so much history kind of took place in such a short span of time that's relatively abandoned, at least today. Now, on a normal day, when we're not in quarantine, there'll be all kinds of people visiting this museum, especially on weekends. You'll see a lot of people on the streets in front of the building who are sort of, we'll say, spinning their conspiracy theories for the JFK assassination, and some of them even bring literature that they've written to just kind of hand out to people and make them aware of this theory or that theory or this actually happened. This is the fence behind the Grassy Knoll where the alleged second shooter may or may not have been. One of the reasons I think this site is so interesting is because things that are completely mundane, like the Grassy Knoll, it's just basically a slope with some grass, and this fence here turned into some kind of mysterious places based on the events that happened around them. And even though the Kennedy assassination was obviously a huge tragedy, various aspects of the assassination itself, as well as some of the sort of mysteries that surround it, have kind of turned into comedic tropes in a way. If you say Grassy Knoll, the first thing that comes to mind for people is sort of political intrigue and political assassinations themselves. And again, all it is basically just a patch of grass. You see countless references to the JFK assassination in pop culture. One that stands out in my mind is the classic episode of Seinfeld where Jerry takes the golf club and tries to prove that the Mets player did not actually spit on Newman and Kramer. That is actually a reference to the JFK film directed by Oliver Stone. So you have things that reference the Kennedy assassination that are then referenced by other things. It's a funny coincidence that the man who is most famous for recording a presidential assassination's first name was Abraham. Now, if you're interested in a little bit of Mr. Zapruder's background, I recommend you seek it out elsewhere. I know a little bit about it, but only through watching other YouTube things and visiting the 6th floor museum when I was a kid, but he actually worked nearby. He stood there on this plinth, and he got some footage of the assassination. Today, that footage is actually in the Library of Congress. So when you look out into the road here, you're actually going to see 2 X's. You can't see them very well on camera, but there's one, and then the other one's back this way, and those are actually where the bullets supposedly hit President Kennedy as he was driving down the road. And like I said, on days when we aren't in lockdown, there's oftentimes a bunch of conspiracy theorists or people who claim they figured out the real events behind the JFK assassination, and they stand here along these sidewalks, and they'll kind of talk to anybody who will go past, and some of them promote their own literature that they have about it. Well, there isn't a car coming. I'm going to try to dart out here and get a shot of this X. And as we look back, you'll see the 6th floor museum, and you can even actually see the window where Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly shot President Kennedy from. Here's a map of Dealey Plaza. And if you come to Dealey Plaza or the 6th floor museum, I very much recommend that you check out any of these maps, diagrams, plaques, etc. About the area and about the Kennedy assassination itself. You can learn some really interesting tidbits of information. For example, one thing I didn't know before I saw it on one of these plaques here was that one of the shots fired from Lee Harvey Oswald's gun allegedly ricocheted off a tree. I thought that was interesting. I didn't realize that. So let's go ahead and take a look at least at the ground floor of the building. Ignore that shopping cart there. And as you look up, there's going to be an arrow, and it'll show you the window where Kennedy was shot from. Now, fun fact about that, you can't see it on camera, but the day I was there, the museum was not open, but that window was actually propped open. So I'm not sure if they leave that open the whole time or if there's another pane of glass behind it when it's open or something like that. But interesting and nice touch on the part of the museum staff, if that's on purpose, which I assume it is. Lee Harvey Oswald actually had a very interesting life even before he assassinated President Kennedy. I read the Wikipedia page on it. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are far more knowledgeable about it than I am. And I've always noticed that the Kennedy assassination, especially for people of a certain age, it really captured America's imagination, and it's sort of, we'll say, scarred onto American psyche. So there's all kinds of people out there who have their own theories, or they believe Oswald really did it and he was a lone shooter and things like that. If you actually look on the outside of the sixth floor museum, you'll see a plaque, and people have kind of acknowledged the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty around the Kennedy assassination. And here you'll see the word allegedly has been highlighted by visitors to the museum. Make sure to put your conspiracy theories in the comments section. And that'll do it for another episode of Hoosier Adventures. I hope you like, comment, and subscribe. And tune back in for more Hoosier Adventures in the future.